Hello, please turn in your Bibles with me to Genesis 22, where we will see a guy named Abraham and his son Isaac. Verse 1 says, "And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and he said unto him, Abraham, he said, Behold, here am I. And he said," so in that first verse we see someone named Abraham. And he's mentioned in the Bible before and stuff. But we see it says, "And God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Here am I." So we already see that Abraham is an obedient servant of God. He's not asking God like, "Oh, what do you like?" Hey, I'll only do this, or he's not being ignorant and not answering to him. He just immediately goes, "Here am I." So, verse 2, "And he said, Take thy son, and thine only son, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him for their burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I tell of thee." So then we see someone named Isaac. Now that's Abraham's son that he loves. He loves dearly, like anyone would love his son, but Isaac was special because Abraham and his wife Sarah were too old to have children, but God blessed them with the son Isaac because they really wanted to be able to have a son. So, and then that God's asking Abraham to, give up a burnt offering of his son. That means to sacrifice his son on this altar with fire, and to kill his son to praise and glorify him. But you see in the first verse it says God did tempt Abraham. So God's doing all of this to test Abraham's faith, to see how faithful is Abraham. How much does Abraham truly trust God? Verse 3, "And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, rose up, and went unto the place of which God had told him." So we see that God's immediately obedient to God. He might not want to do this thing because he loves his son, but he also loves God, has faith in God, and trusts God. And he's fearful of God. So he's immediately obedient to what God tells him. It says he woke up early in the morning, showing that he was obedient immediately. And then verse 4 it says, "Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young man, Abide here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder, and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of his burnt offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand, and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, saying, My father, he said. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" So in that, his son is asking, "Hey, where is the animal we're gonna sacrifice?" Because he doesn't know. Abraham couldn't tell his son, or else his son would probably run away. So he didn't know, and he's wondering, hey, where is the wolf? If you look in verse 8, Abraham replies, and verse 8 says, and Abraham said, my son, God will provide a lamb for the burnt offering. So they went, both of them together. So then we see Abraham's telling his son that God will provide a lamb. He loves his son, and but God's testing his faith. And Abraham's telling, so imagine being Abraham right now. You have a son. And, and God's asking you to give up your son for him. God's asking you to give up your son for him and put him as an offering, as a sacrifice. And imagine Abraham's place right now. How much Abraham's going through, that he has his obedience and trust and faith and fearfulness in God. His love for God. Verse 8, and Abraham said, my son, God will provide Verse 9, and they came to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him upon the altar of the wood. So now Abraham's putting his son on the altar, about to sacrifice him. Verse 10 says, and Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. So Abraham's sitting there, about to full on jab a knife into his son, and offer up his son for God. Verse 11 says, and an angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here am I. And he said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do anything unto him for now. And I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked behind him. A ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram, and offered it up a burnt offering in the stead of his son. So that's saying, Abraham's about to full on sacrifice his son for God, because he loves God and has faith in God. But then an angel of the Lord stopped him. And because he's about to do it. God tested his faith. That shows his faith. Abraham was in the act of doing it, but the angel stops him. And we see that God provided a lamb caught in a thicket, is like bushes and vines, caught in those by his horns. So God provided an offering for Abraham because he showed his faith, and it says that he offered up the ram pretty much instead of his son. So God provided for Abraham. God saw Abraham's faith. Verse 14 says, and Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day. In this mount, let me reset that. Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, and the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, by myself I have sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hath not withheld thy son, thine only son, that is a blessing, I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed, as the stars of heaven, and the sand, which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thine seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So we see that because of Abraham's, faith in God and trust in God, his fearfulness in God, God blessed him. Abraham was sitting there about to kill his son for God because of his faith. His faith was so strong, his fearfulness was so strong, and that's how we should be in our everyday lives as a Christian. His faith and love for God. He was about to kill his son, but God stopped him because he saw his faith. God blessed him. God blessed Abraham because of his faith. It says that he multiplied his seed. He multiplied pretty much his family tree is a way to put that, and everything like that. It says that he's blessed, and in verse 7 it says, that in blessing I will bless thee. God blessed him for his faith. So we should want to live Abraham's faith. If you haven't and you want to, just think of this. Think of Abraham's faith. Love God. And that's all for today.